Welcome back and thank you for joining the channel where ordinary pocket change turns into extraordinary stories of hidden wealth, overlooked history, and life-changing possibilities. And today we're diving deep into a coin that almost everyone has seen, spent, or ignored without a second thought: the 1984 no-mint Mark 1 cent USA coin. A humble penny that on the surface looks like nothing more than everyday copper-plated zinc, but beneath that ordinary appearance hides a combination of rare errors, production mistakes, historical circumstances, collector psychology, and extreme scarcity scenarios that have fueled claims, legends, and speculative valuations reaching as high as $23 million, a number that sounds unbelievable until you understand how the coin market works, how errors are authenticated, and how a single cent can become a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. Because value in numismatics is not about face value or even metal content but about rarity, demand, story, and condition, and the 1984 penny sits at a fascinating crossroads of all four, produced during a transitional era at the United States Mint when cost-cutting measures, massive production volumes, and evolving machinery created the perfect storm for mistakes to slip through, mistakes that today make collectors' hearts race, starting with the broader context of 1984 itself. A year when billions of pennies were struck in Philadelphia alone without a mint mark, meaning these coins flooded circulation at unprecedented levels, handled by machines running non-stop, dies wearing down quickly, planchets fed at high speed, and quality control struggling to keep pace, which is exactly the environment where rare errors are born. And among these errors, the most famous associated with the 1984 no-mint mark penny is the dramatic and highly sought-after doubled die averse. An error that occurred during the die creation process when the hub impressed the design onto the die more than once, at slightly misaligned angles, resulting in visible doubling on key design elements such as the date, the word Liberty, and the motto "I in God We Trust." And while doubled dies are known in other years, the 1984 double die averse stands out because of the strength of the doubling and the year's massive mintage, which paradoxically makes genuine examples both elusive and heavily counterfeited, driving verified specimens to astonishing prices, especially when preserved in high mint state grades. But the double die is only the beginning of what makes this penny potentially worth huge money, because collectors and investors aren't just chasing one error, they're chasing perfection combined with imperfection, meaning coins that show dramatic mistakes yet remain in pristine condition, a rare combination indeed. And beyond doubled dies, the 1984 no-mint mark penny is associated with off-center strikes, where the planchet was not properly seated during striking, causing part of the design to be missing and leaving a crescent of blank metal. And while minor off-center strikes are relatively common, extreme examples showing 50% or more off-center with a full visible date are exceptionally rare and command huge premiums, especially when combined with other anomalies, such as broad strikes where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar, causing it to spread wider than normal with a distorted rim, or double strikes where the coin was struck more than once, sometimes at different angles, creating ghost-like overlapping images that instantly signal something extraordinary. And then there are wrong planchet errors, among the most exciting possibilities in modern sense, where a 1984 penny design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or composition, such as a dime planchet, resulting in a smaller, thinner coin with a cent design. Or even more sensationally, struck on a foreign planchet or experimental alloy, and while these are incredibly rare, confirmed examples can reach 6 or 7 figures on their own. And when people talk about a 1984 penny being worth $23 million, they are often imagining a perfect storm scenario, a unique or nearly unique specimen combining multiple major errors, such as a strong double die averse, struck on the wrong planchet, with an off-center or double strike, all preserved in gem mint state condition, authenticated by a top grading service, and backed by ironclad provenance, because at that level of value, the coin is no longer just a collectible, it becomes a museum-grade artifact, a headline-making discovery that attracts global attention, wealthy investors, and institutional buyers. And the idea may sound far-fetched, but numismatic history is filled with examples where a single coin shattered previous records due to uniqueness and story. And the penny series in particular has produced some of the most valuable coins ever sold, such as the 1943 copper cent and the 1944 steel cent, proving that even modern-era pennies can achieve astronomical values under the right circumstances. And the 1984 penny benefits from another important factor, the transition-era metallurgy. Because starting in 1982 the U.S. Mint shifted from solid copper cents to copper-plated zinc, and in the early years of this change, planchet inconsistencies were common, leading to errors such as improperly bonded copper plating, missing plating on one or both sides, blistered surfaces, and exposed zinc cores, and a 1984 penny showing dramatic plating errors, especially full missing plating revealing raw zinc that has survived without corrosion, can be exceptionally valuable, and if such a coin also exhibits doubling or strike errors, the value multiplies dramatically, and collectors pay enormous premiums for visually striking errors that tell a clear story at a glance. Because coin collecting is as much about visual impact as it is about technical rarity. And speaking of visual impact, die cracks, die breaks, and cuds are another class of errors associated with high mintage years like 1984, where overused dies began to crack or break, leaving raised lines or blobs of metal on the coin's surface. And while minor die cracks are common and inexpensive, major retained cuds that dramatically alter the coin's appearance are rare and desirable, particularly when they occur on the obverse affecting Lincoln's portrait or key lettering. And again, condition is everything, because a dramatic error on a heavily worn coin is interesting, but the same error on a blazing red mint state example can be worth hundreds of times more. And this brings us to grading, the gatekeeper of big money in numismatics. Because for a 1984 no-mint mark penny to even approach a multi-million-dollar valuation, it must be authenticated and graded by a respected third-party service such as PCGS or NGC, with clear attribution of the error, a high numerical grade, and ideally a designation such as red for copper color, and the population reports from these grading services play a crucial role, because when a coin is confirmed as the only example or one of just a handful in a particular grade and error combination, the market reacts dramatically, creating bidding wars that push prices into the stratosphere. And this is where the myth and reality of the $23 million valuation intersect, because while no publicly recorded sale of a 1984 penny has yet reached that exact figure, the numismatic community understands that if a truly unique specimen were discovered, combining multiple major errors in top condition, the theoretical value could reach such heights, especially in an era where ultra-wealthy collectors view rare coins as alternative assets comparable to fine art or classic cars, and they are willing to pay whatever it takes to own something no one else can. And this speculative potential fuels treasure hunt excitement among everyday people, because unlike ancient gold coins locked away in museums, pennies are still hiding in jars, drawers, and collections all over the world, and the possibility, however remote, that a life-changing coin could be sitting unnoticed is what keeps the hobby alive, and it's important to understand that the vast majority of 1984 pennies are worth only face value. But value in numismatics is not democratic, it is extreme and uneven, with a tiny fraction of coins accounting for nearly all the money, and that tiny fraction is defined by errors, mistakes, and anomalies, which are essentially the fingerprints of human and mechanical fallibility frozen in metal, and the 1984 penny is a textbook example of how modern mass production can paradoxically create extraordinary rarities, because when billions of coins are struck, even events with 1 in a billion odds can and do happen. And when they happen, they produce coins that defy expectations and redefine what is possible in the market, and beyond technical errors, there is also the psychological and narrative component, because collectors are drawn to stories, and a 1984 penny story includes the era of Reagan-era America, economic change, mint modernization, and the everyday nature of the coin itself, making the contrast between humble origin and extreme value even more compelling. Next, 1968 mint-marked 1-cent USA coin, a small copper-colored piece of American history that has been quietly circulating for decades, often overlooked, spent without thought, and dismissed as common pocket change, yet under very specific circumstances and rare combinations of errors, condition, provenance, and collector demand. This ordinary-looking coin has been discussed in speculative and high-end numismatic circles with valuations reaching as high as $29 million, a figure that sounds impossible until you understand how rarity truly works in the coin world, how mistakes happen inside mints, and how a single surviving example can rewrite everything we think we know about value, because in numismatics, price is not determined by age alone, nor by metal content, but by scarcity, desirability, authenticity, and story. And the 1968 penny sits at a fascinating intersection of all these factors, produced during a pivotal era in U.S. minting history when technology was changing, demand for coinage was exploding, and quality control was being pushed to its limits, creating conditions where extraordinary errors could and did occur, starting with the historical backdrop of 1968 itself, a turbulent year in American history marked by social change, economic pressure, and massive coin production demands. As the U.S. Mint worked relentlessly to supply enough cents for a growing population and expanding commerce, and at the Denver Mint, where the D Mint mark was added to cents that year, production volumes were enormous, machines ran continuously, dies were used aggressively, and the human element of minting combined with mechanical stress made mistakes inevitable. And while the majority of 1968 pennies are common and worth only face value, a microscopic fraction were struck with dramatic errors that transformed them into legendary rarities. And among the most important of these are double die errors, particularly double die obverse varieties, where elements of the design such as the date, the word liberty, and the motto I in God we trust show clear, intentional-looking doubling caused not by wear or damage but by a misalignment during the die creation process. And unlike machine doubling, which adds little value, true doubled dies are created when the hub impresses the design into the die more than once at slightly different angles, permanently embedding the error into every coin struck from that die, and if a strong double die obverse were discovered on a 1968 penny, especially one previously unknown or unique, the numismatic world would take notice immediately, because rarity multiplied by historical significance and high-grade preservation is where values begin to skyrocket, and the Denver Mint in 1968 is known to have produced a variety of minor and moderate doubled dies. But the possibility of an undiscovered or extremely rare major doubled die keeps collectors searching rolls, collections, and old hoards to this day, and doubling is only one chapter in the story of why this coin can be so valuable, because the late 1960s were also a time when die deterioration errors became increasingly common due to the push for high output, resulting in coins with heavy die cracks, die breaks, and retained cuds, where parts of the die broke away, leaving raised, blob-like areas of metal on the finished coin. And while small die cracks are relatively common, massive cuds that dramatically alter Lincoln's portrait or the lettering are rare and visually striking, and when such an error appears on a coin that is otherwise sharply struck and well preserved, collectors are willing to pay extraordinary premiums. And then there are off-metal and wrong planchet errors, among the most sensational mistakes a mint can make, where a penny design is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a different country. And in 1968, when multiple denominations were being produced simultaneously at the Denver Mint, the chance of a planchet mix-up, though extremely small, was not zero, and a 1968 cent struck on a dime planchet, for example, would be smaller, lighter, and instantly recognizable as something extraordinary, and confirmed examples of wrong planchet cents from other years have sold for hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. And when people speak of a $29 million valuation, they are envisioning a once-in-a-generation discovery, a coin that combines a wrong planchet strike with additional errors, such as doubling or multiple strikes, all authenticated and graded at the highest level, because at that point the coin becomes unique, or nearly unique, and uniqueness is the single most powerful driver of price in numismatics, and beyond wrong planchets, multiple strike errors are another area where value can explode, particularly when a coin is struck more than once while being misaligned or rotated, creating overlapping images, distorted portraits, and surreal designs that look almost like abstract art, and collectors love these pieces because they clearly demonstrate the minting process gone wrong, and a dramatic multiple strike error on a 1968 penny, especially one that still shows a clear date and mint mark, would be a centerpiece in any advanced error collection. And then there is the issue of composition and surface anomalies. Because although the 1968 penny was struck in a period before the 1982 transition to copper-plated zinc, it still experienced its own set of metallurgical issues, including improper alloy mixes, laminations where strips of metal peel away from the surface, and bonded layer errors, where internal flaws in the metal cause cracks, lifting, or missing sections, and full lamination errors that expose underlying metal layers are visually dramatic and highly collectible, especially when they occur on the obverse and do not significantly damage the overall eye appeal of the coin. And again, condition is everything, because a dramatic error on a heavily worn coin tells one story, but the same error on a mint-state coin with original luster tells a far more powerful one. And this brings us to grading and certification, which are absolutely essential when discussing million-dollar valuations, because no serious buyer will consider a coin at that level without third-party authentication from a respected grading service, complete with detailed attribution of the error, numerical grade, and any special designations that enhance desirability. And population reports maintained by these grading services are critical, because they show how many examples of a particular coin and error combination exist in each grade, and when a coin is confirmed as the finest known or the only example of its kind, demand can become intense, with wealthy collectors, institutions, and even museums competing for ownership, driving prices far beyond what might seem rational to outsiders. And the 1968 penny has another important factor working in its favor, which is the broader cultural and collector interest in Lincoln cents as a series, because Lincoln pennies are among the most widely collected coins in the world, appealing to beginners and advanced collectors alike. And this broad base of interest means that when an extraordinary example appears, there is a deep pool of potential buyers, from specialists who focus on errors to investors who see rare coins as alternative assets. And when you combine that with the narrative power of a humble penny from a turbulent year in American history becoming a multi-million-dollar rarity, you have a story that captures imagination and fuels bidding wars. And it's also important to understand that when people discuss values like $29 million, they are often talking about theoretical maximums based on perfect conditions, unique status, and ideal timing, because markets are dynamic, and prices are influenced by trends, media attention, and the presence of motivated buyers. And numismatic history shows us that record-breaking prices often occur when a coin checks every box at once: rarity, condition, story, and timing. And the Lincoln Cent series has already produced several of the most famous and valuable coins in the hobby, such as the 1909 SVDB, the 1943 copper cent, and the 1944 steel cent, proving that even small copper coins can command enormous prices under the right circumstances. And the idea that a 1968 penny could one day join that elite group is not as far-fetched as it sounds when you consider how many coins have yet to be discovered, misattributed, or sitting unnoticed in old collections, because history shows us again and again that major discoveries often come from unexpected places: a forgotten jar, an inherited collection, or a roll that sat untouched for decades. And this sense of possibility is what keeps collectors searching and learning, because the odds may be slim, but the reward is extraordinary. And even beyond the ultra-high-end scenarios, many 1968 pennies with genuine errors are already worth significant money, from thousands to tens of thousands of dollars, proving that value exists on a spectrum and that knowledge can turn an ordinary coin into a meaningful asset. And the story of the 1968 mint-marked 1 cent USA coin is ultimately a reminder that value is not always obvious at first glance, that mistakes can become treasures, and that history often hides in the smallest details. Next, 1990 no mint mark 1 cent USA coin, a penny struck in Philadelphia that looks ordinary, feels ordinary, and spends just like any other cent, yet under extremely rare and specific circumstances has been discussed in high-level numismatic conversations with potential valuations reaching as high as $15 million. A figure that sounds shocking until you truly understand how the coin market works, how minting errors occur, how rarity is created, and how a single surviving example can redefine value, because in numismatics, value is never about face value and rarely about metal content. It is about rarity, demand condition, historical context, and the story a coin tells, and the 1990 no-mint mark penny sits at a fascinating intersection of all these forces, produced during a period of massive coin production, evolving mint technology, and cost efficiency pressures that created the perfect environment for extraordinary mistakes to slip through unnoticed, mistakes that, decades later, can transform a common cent into a life-changing discovery. And to understand why this coin can reach such staggering theoretical values, we must first understand the era in which it was made, because by 1990 the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies each year, especially at the Philadelphia Mint where no mint mark coins were struck. And the penny itself had already undergone its major composition change in 1982, shifting from solid copper to copper-plated zinc, a change that introduced a whole new class of errors related to plating, bonding, and planchet preparation. And while most 1990 pennies are copper-plated zinc with relatively consistent quality, the sheer volume of production meant that even rare mistakes could and did occur, and it is these mistakes, when combined with pristine condition and proper authentication, that formed the foundation of million-dollar valuations. Starting with one of the most important and widely recognized error categories, the double die obverse, an error created during the die-making process when the hub impresses the design onto the die more than once at slightly misaligned angles, permanently embedding doubling into the die itself. And unlike machine doubling, which is common and usually worthless, true doubled dies show clear separation and thickness in design elements such as the date, the word liberty, and the motto "I in God we trust." And while no massively famous double die obverse like the 1955 has been universally acknowledged for 1990, the possibility of an undiscovered or extremely rare double die keeps collectors searching, because history has shown again and again that major varieties can remain hidden for decades before being recognized, and if a strong, previously unknown double die obverse were discovered on a 1990 no-mint mark penny and authenticated by a top grading service, it would instantly become one of the most important modern Lincoln cent varieties ever found, and value at that point would no longer be measured in thousands or even hundreds of thousands, but in millions, especially if the coin were preserved in high mint state condition with original red color, because condition is a multiplier in numismatics, and the difference between an average circulated coin and a gem quality example can be the difference between a curiosity and a headline-making treasure. And doubling is only one layer of the story, because the copper-plated zinc composition of the 1990 penny opened the door to dramatic plating errors that collectors find irresistible, such as missing copper plating on one or both sides, where the silvery gray zinc core is exposed, creating a striking visual contrast that immediately signals something is wrong. And while minor plating flaws are relatively common, full missing plating errors are rare, and even rarer are examples that have survived decades without severe corrosion. Because zinc is highly reactive, and a well-preserved missing plating error from 1990 would be an exceptional find, especially if combined with other anomalies. And then there are blistered plating errors, where trapped gas causes the copper layer to bubble and lift, creating a textured, uneven surface that looks almost alien compared to a normal penny. And these dramatic visual errors attract strong demand, particularly when the date and details remain sharp. And another major category of errors that adds enormous value potential to the 1990 no-mint mark penny is the off-center strike, where the planchet was not properly aligned during striking, resulting in part of the design being missing and a blank crescent of metal visible. And while small off-center strikes are not uncommon, extreme examples showing 50% or more off-center while still retaining a full visible date are rare and highly desirable. And if such an error were discovered on a 1990 penny in mint state condition, it could already command a significant premium. But when collectors and investors talk about $15 million valuations, they are imagining a perfect storm scenario, a coin that combines multiple major errors at once, such as an extreme off-center strike combined with a doubled die and plating anomaly, all preserved in pristine condition, because at that point the coin is no longer just rare, it is unique. And uniqueness is the single most powerful driver of value in the coin world, and wrong planchet errors push this concept even further. Because they represent one of the most dramatic failures in the minting process, where a penny design is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or composition, such as a dime planchet, resulting in a smaller, thinner coin with a cent design, or even more sensationally, struck on a foreign planchet or an experimental alloy. And while such errors are extraordinarily rare in the modern era due to improved quality control, confirmed examples from other years have sold for staggering amounts, and a 1990 no-mint mark cent struck on the wrong planchet, especially if it were the only known example, would immediately become a centerpiece of modern U.S. numismatics, attracting global attention, institutional interest, and fierce competition among elite collectors. And this is where valuations in the tens of millions become conceivable, because at that level, the buyer is not just a hobbyist, but a wealthy investor or institution seeking a trophy-level object. And, beyond planchet errors, multiple strike errors add another layer of intrigue and value, where a coin is struck more than once, sometimes at different angles or with rotation, creating overlapping images that look chaotic yet fascinating, and collectors prize these errors because they provide a clear, visual record of the minting process gone wrong. And a dramatic multiple strike error on a 1990 penny that still clearly shows the date and design elements would be highly desirable, especially if combined with other errors. And then there are die deterioration errors, die cracks, die breaks, and retained cuds, which become more common in high mintage years when dies are pushed beyond their ideal lifespan. And while minor die cracks are common and inexpensive, large retained cuds that dramatically alter the appearance of the coin, especially on the obverse affecting Lincoln's portrait or the lettering, are rare and visually striking. And again, rarity combined with eye appeal and condition is what drives extreme value, and all of this potential means nothing without authentication, because in the modern coin market, third-party grading and attribution by respected services such as PCGS or NGC is essential, especially when discussing million-dollar coins, because these services provide not only verification of authenticity but also standardized grading, detailed error attribution, and population data that establishes just how rare a particular coin truly is. And population reports play a crucial role, because when a coin is confirmed as the only known example or the finest known in its category, demand can become explosive, with buyers willing to pay virtually any price to secure ownership. And the 1990 no-mint mark penny also benefits from the immense popularity of the Lincoln Cent series as a whole. Because Lincoln pennies are collected by millions of people worldwide, from beginners to advanced specialists, and this broad base of interest ensures that when an extraordinary example appears, there is a deep and competitive market ready to respond, and this is further amplified by media attention, because headlines about pennies worth millions capture the public imagination, bringing new eyes and new money into the market, which in turn drives prices higher for top-tier examples, creating a feedback loop where perception and reality reinforce each other. And while it is important to be realistic and understand that the vast majority of 1990 pennies are worth only face value, it is equally important to recognize that numismatic value is not evenly distributed, because a tiny fraction of coins account for a massive share of the total market value, and those coins are defined by extreme rarity, dramatic errors, and exceptional preservation. Next, 1980 mint mark D 1 cent USA coin, a penny struck at the Denver Mint that appears completely ordinary at first glance yet under extremely rare and specific circumstances has been discussed in elite numismatic circles with speculative valuations reaching as high as $17 million, a figure that sounds unbelievable until you truly understand how rarity is created, how minting mistakes occur, and how a single surviving example can redefine value forever, because in the world of coin collecting, value is not determined by face value, age, or metal alone but by a powerful combination of scarcity, demand, condition, authentication, historical context, and story, and the 1980 D penny sits at a fascinating crossroads of all these factors, produced during a critical transition era in United States minting history when massive production volumes, evolving mint technology, cost-cutting pressures, and human oversight combined to create the perfect environment for extraordinary errors to slip through unnoticed, errors that decades later can transform a 1-cent coin into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And to understand why the 1980 mint-marked penny can even be mentioned alongside multi-million-dollar coins, we must first understand the historical and technical background of its creation, because 1980 was a year of immense coin production demand in the United States, with billions of cents struck to support a growing economy still heavily reliant on cash transactions. And at the Denver Mint, the presses ran relentlessly, dies were used aggressively, and quality control, while rigorous by normal standards, was strained by the sheer scale of output, and it is precisely under such conditions that rare and dramatic mint errors are born, not through negligence but through the unavoidable limits of machinery and human oversight when speed and volume are prioritized. And while the overwhelming majority of 1980 pennies are common and worth only face value, a microscopic fraction were struck with anomalies so extreme that they instantly elevate the coin into a completely different category, starting with one of the most important and valuable error types in all of numismatics, the doubled die, particularly the doubled die obverse, which occurs during the die-making process when the hub impresses the design into the die more than once at slightly misaligned angles, permanently embedding doubling into the die itself so that every coin struck from that die carries the error, and unlike machine doubling, which is caused by loose dies during striking and adds little or no value, true doubled dies show clear, rounded, and separated doubling that is part of the design itself, often most visible on the date, the word liberty, and the motto I in God we trust. And while the 1980 cent is not yet universally famous for a single dominant doubled die variety like the legendary 1955 penny, the numismatic world knows from experience that major doubled dies can remain undiscovered or underappreciated for decades, and if a strong, previously unknown doubled die obverse were to be discovered on a 1980 penny and authenticated by a top-tier grading service, it would instantly become one of the most important modern Lincoln cent varieties ever found, and value at that level would no longer be measured in thousands or hundreds of thousands but in millions. Especially if the coin were preserved in pristine mint state condition with original red color, because condition acts as a powerful multiplier in numismatics, and the difference between an average example and a gem-quality specimen can be the difference between curiosity and legend. And doubling is only one chapter in the story of why this coin can reach such staggering theoretical values. Because the 1980 penny was struck during the coppertizing transition era that began in 1982 but was already influenced by cost-efficiency experimentation and planchet preparation challenges. And even before the official change, issues such as improper alloy mixes, internal flaws, and lamination errors occurred, creating coins where layers of metal peel away, crack, or separate, revealing dramatic visual defects that collectors prize for both rarity and eye appeal. And a full lamination error on a 1980 penny that leaves a large portion of the surface missing while still retaining a sharp date and mint mark would be a spectacular find, especially if preserved without heavy wear. And then there are off-center strikes, another category of errors that can push values dramatically higher, where the planchet was not properly seated during striking, resulting in part of the design being missing and a blank crescent of metal visible, and while minor off-center strikes are relatively common and affordable, extreme examples showing 50% or more off-center while still retaining a full visible date and mint mark are rare and highly desirable, and when collectors and investors speak of $17 million valuations, they are imagining a perfect storm scenario where a 1980 penny combines an extreme off-center strike with another major error, such as a doubled die or lamination, all preserved in mint state condition, because at that point the coin is not merely rare, it is effectively unique, and uniqueness is the single most powerful driver of price in the coin world. And pushing rarity even further are wrong planchet errors, among the most dramatic failures that can occur during minting, where a penny design is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or composition, such as a dime planchet, resulting in a smaller, thinner coin with a cent design, or even more astonishingly, struck on a foreign planchet or experimental alloy, and while such errors are extraordinarily rare, confirmed examples from other years have sold for staggering amounts. And a 1980 cent struck on the wrong planchet, especially if it were the only known example, would instantly become a centerpiece of modern American numismatics, attracting global attention, institutional interest, and fierce competition among elite collectors, and at that level, valuations in the tens of millions become not only imaginable but plausible. Because the buyer is no longer a casual collector but a wealthy investor or institution seeking a trophy-level object that cannot be replicated or replaced, and multiple strike errors add yet another layer of intrigue and value potential, where a coin is struck more than once, sometimes rotated or misaligned between strikes, creating overlapping images, distorted portraits, and surreal designs that look almost like abstract art, and collectors are drawn to these pieces because they provide a clear, visual record of the minting process breaking down. And a dramatic multiple strike error on a 1980 penny that still clearly shows the date and mint mark would be a standout piece in any advanced collection, especially if combined with other anomalies, and die deterioration errors also play a role, because during high-output years like 1980, dies were often pushed beyond their optimal lifespan, leading to heavy die cracks, die breaks, and retained cuds, where sections of the die break away and leave raised, blob-like areas of metal on the finished coin, and while small die cracks are common and add little value, massive retained cuds that dramatically alter Lincoln's portrait or the lettering are rare and visually striking, and when such an error appears on a well-preserved coin with strong eye appeal, collector demand can be intense, and none of these possibilities mean anything without authentication, because at the $1,000,000 level, trust and verification are everything, and third-party grading by respected services such as PCGS or NGC is absolutely essential, providing authentication, standardized grading, detailed error attribution, and population data that establishes just how rare a particular coin truly is. And population reports are critical because when a coin is confirmed as the only known example or the finest known in its category, demand can explode, with buyers willing to pay virtually any price to secure ownership, and the 1980 penny also benefits from the immense popularity of the Lincoln Cent series as a whole. Because Lincoln pennies are among the most widely collected coins in the world, appealing to beginners, specialists, and investors alike, and this broad base of interest ensures that when an extraordinary example appears, there is a deep and competitive market ready to respond, and this is further amplified by media attention, because stories about pennies worth millions capture the public imagination, drawing new eyes and new money into the hobby, which in turn drives prices higher for top-tier examples, creating a feedback loop where perception and reality reinforce each other. And while it is crucial to remain realistic and understand that the vast majority of 1980 pennies are worth only 1 cent, it is equally important to recognize that numismatic value is not evenly distributed, because a tiny fraction of coins account for a massive share of total market value, and those coins are defined by extreme rarity, dramatic errors, exceptional condition, and compelling stories.